Hi, I'm Matthew Herzberg, and this is the Myopia Mindset. Did you know that you have gold in your files? That's the way that Carrie Herzberg used to put it back when I was the executive director of the American Academy of Ortho-Keratology and Myopia Control. When I would run a booth at different meetings, at different conferences to talk about the AAOMC and Vision by Design, I would get these docs who said, I just don't have myopia patients. And what a weird time to be living in now because, as Brianna Roos says it, you've got a myopia clinic, whether you want it or not. And Dr. Herzberg's words of prophecy have come true in this situation. There's gold in the files. So we talk about that, how to prospect through your records to find those ideal candidates, those great cases, those people who you should be talking about myopia management with. So this is a preview to that episode. This is actually a bonus episode. The paid supporters of the Myopia Mindset get one of these bonus episodes every single month. And I like to do little previews so you can see what the paid supporters are getting, because these are individuals that believe so much in what I am doing and helping me spread the word, talking about how myopia management's the coolest thing ever and more ECPs should be doing it. And as a way of giving back, our supporters get extended versions of every episode that we do, and they get one of these bonus episodes. And if you are interested in becoming a paid supporter of the Myopia Mindset, you can do so on our Substack. myopiamindset.substack.com is how you do that. And I like to say, if you would buy me a cup of coffee to talk about myopia, to bring on amazing guests, to really nerd out about this stuff, then please consider becoming a paid supporter, because it's $12 a month, which is basically the cost of a cup of coffee each and every week. So enjoy this preview. Thank you so much to our paid supporters for making the Myopia Mindset what it is. There is a growing number of you with each passing week, and I am so excited about it. Thank you so much. Let's get to the episode. On this edition of the Myopia Mindset, I have returning guest co-host Dr. Carrie Herzberg on with me today. Carrie, welcome back to the program.
Well, thanks, Matt. It's great to be here. I feel like I should have my miner's hat and pick and shovel here. We're going to be like the old 49ers back in the old West. Go out and do some mining.
That's right. And what Carrie's alluding to is that this episode is based on something that Carrie said to me a long time ago. Carrie is my dad. He is a pioneer orthokeratologist. He founded and was the first president of the American Academy of Ortho-Keratology and Myopia Control. Back then, it was the Ortho-Keratology Academy of America. I was the executive director for that nonprofit. But when I first started out, just after college, just looking for work, I was in this industry before college, but like officially for the academy, it was during my early college years, and we were just working booths. We would get a booth at a meeting to talk about the academy and myopia management, but back then we weren't calling it myopia management just yet officially.
Yeah.
It was more about orthokeratology. And, we really had to zero in on that very specific practitioner, that very specific doctor who we knew that the messaging would get to, because there was so much resistance back then, right? But I remember what would happen is I would often talk up a person or make an introduction or grab people out of the the aisles, out of the walkways in front of the booth. And then the conversation would eventually get to the point where it's like, I can't speak on this anymore. I need to hand it over to Carrie because Carrie does this treatment. So there's a lot of questions that come up. And the first time I ever heard this statement that Carrie is making, which is there's gold in the patient files, right? The first time I ever heard this was you spent so much time talking with one particular individual who he just kept saying over and over again, I just don't see the right patients. I just don't have the right patients. I don't have Ortho-K patients. Like, it's just not happening. Like, and he
Right.
walked away, and I was like, wow, you talked to that guy a long time. And Carrie was just like stoically standing there. I think he had like a glass of wine or something, and he just like took a drink, and he goes, that guy has patience. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, that guy's got plenty of patience. He just doesn't know it. And I was like, really? And I was like fascinated. And I was like, what do you mean? And Carrie said, there's gold in the patient files.
Right.
All right. Which is the subject of today's episode. So, Carrie, what did you mean? I know what you meant. I know what you mean now, but explain to the audience what that means.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, it's the fact is that you have walking in there every day Ortho-K patients that you're not seeing. I mean, I would go through this with the doctors that would shadow me. They would come to my practice, and we would be working a patient up, and then I would ask them, and this doesn't necessarily mean a youngster. This could be any age. And I ask them, well, what is your, what would you treat this patient with? And they'd go through all a list of things, and 4 or 5, 6 different things, and none of them would be Ortho-K.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it would be, well, why don't you consider Ortho-K for this? And so that's the kind of a thing. It doesn't really boil down to that. The fact is that there aren't Ortho-K patients sitting there. It's the fact is the doctor trained and prepared to deal with those Ortho-K patients. So is he or she brave enough to talk to that patient about Ortho-K, even if they've never done a case, let's say, of adult correction for whatever
Right.
it is. So, that was the again, we always go back to it again. The limiter is the head here, the brain, the doctor's is a worst, advocate many
Right.
times, and
Yeah.
he or she will fail at disclosing exactly what they do. And I always I compare Ortho-K to LASIK for a reason, because it's a common mindset. So you need to take that approach. I just saw we were driving up when I just got back from India, so we're getting driven up to the plane. Saw this big a signboard on the 294, and it was a LASIK signboard, and it showed a phoropter in one picture, and then it showed freedom in the other, patient without any
Mm-hmm.
getting the appointment. Simply that's what we do
Right.
with
Yeah.
Ortho-K. Same thing. It's non-surgical, so it actually advocates and is more attractive to many patients that won't do LASIK for reasons that they just don't want to do surgery.
Right.
They it's not that they don't like the idea of freedom. They just don't want to take that step to surgery. And so why not? I mean, you're going to advocate for LASIK. Why don't you advocate for Ortho-K? I mean, it's freedom. It's
Yeah.
basically freedom from daily wear of contacts or glasses.
Right. So what you're saying is that this is for you, this is more about presentation.
Yeah, it's all presentation.
And my add on to this is that, like, through my time and visiting offices and working directly with doctors and meeting their staff and getting to shadow them I went into practices where they were like, hey, can you shadow our staff or a doctor and find out, like, where can we improve? What things can we
Right.
improve on? Right.
Yeah.
And I also take gold in the files to mean that you have these patients
Oh yeah.
sitting in your
Yeah.
office,
Absolutely.
not just physically, but the
Yeah.
information is in their actual patient
Yeah, your,
files.
your best sources of referrals and for patient growth and practices in already in your files that you've missed.
Yeah.
You have that's the best. That's the best source to go to. There are many. We'll talk about many different ways you can grow your practice. But
Right.
it comes down to the first one is the patients you already know, that
Mm-hmm.
have already know who you are. It's the easiest one. It's the lowest hanging fruit, actually. You want to know
Yeah.
honestly, it's right there in your practice, and how to go and look at those patients, and then tap that,
Right.
tap those patients for what you've missed, because I guarantee you there's a ton of them you've missed. There's just sitting
Yeah.
there that could be worked up,
Yeah.
and you haven't done it.
And so both of these versions of this topic, I really wanted us to go into depth in, because when I would bring this up with offices and docs that I would work with, I would say, hey, have you gone through your patient files to look for these like easy, low hanging fruit scenarios?
Hmm.
Oh, yeah, I did that. I did that. I did that. And I would be like, oh, okay. So what did you do? Oh, well, we looked for, and they would, you could tell that they hadn't really done it. Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
did sort of like do a surface level, like cursory, who do we got, who's like a kid, who's a myope, whatever the case may be, but they weren't doing like a deep dive on it. And it
Right.
was often a struggle for me to be like, hey, to convince them, like, let's just sit down and go through your patient files and I'll show you the kind of things we need to look for. And like, okay, that sounds great, but like a lot of practices weren't interested in actually doing it, which I found to be exceptionally frustrating, right? Like I'll give
Yeah.
you an example. If you've got, we've talked about this scenario before. If you've got an even an elderly patient, let's say like a grandma, right? Grandma loves talking about her grandkids. She's got like a bunch of them, right? And you know that she's been myopic her whole life. She's worn glasses. Well, she's an indicator for that potential to be carried on into the next generations.
Mm-hmm.
So you can instantly make that correlation of like, oh, how are your grandkids doing? Tell me about them. Oh, Johnny did this, Sarah's doing this, blah blah blah. And you're like, that's great, that's awesome. Like, and then you weave in the conversation about like, Grandma's been wearing glasses her whole life. Do any of her kids wear glasses? Is that a concern? Like if you could avoid that scenario, like what would she think of that? Like,
Yeah.
you know,
I get lots of thank yous from working up patients in other in other areas of the country because of things like that.
yeah,
We just tell them exactly like you're referring to. We tell them about what's available. With the kids today, it starts out with the devices. All the grandparents are worried about the near point devices like everybody else is.
yeah,
Maybe even more so because they grew up in a generation free of that,
yes.
right?
That is a very understated fact, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
grandparents
yeah,
grew up in a world without these devices.
yeah.
They're already skeptical of them. They already. All right, well, that's it for this regular version of the episode, but the discussion doesn't stop here. It actually continues in an extended version of this episode, which is available to our Substack supporters. You can, if you're interested in getting the rest of the episode, consider becoming a paid supporter of the Myopia Mindset. In addition to an extended version of this episode and every other episode that we do, you'll also get access to exclusive monthly bonus episodes of the Myopia Mindset. And I know you're interested. You've made it this far. And for the cost is $12 a month, which is basically the cost of a cup of coffee each and every week. And that's how I like to put it. Listen, if you would buy me a cup of coffee each and every week to nerd out about myopia, to bring on amazing guests, to spread the word about how awesome myopia management is and how more ECPs should be engaged in this specialty, then please consider becoming a paid supporter of the Myopia Mindset. You can do so on our Substack, myopiamindset.substack.com is how you do that. Thank you so much for your consideration. I'll see you at the next one.